For decades, Benny Hinn stood before millions as one of the most recognizable faces in Christian television. His crusades filled stadiums. His sermons reached every corner of the globe. And his controversial healing ministry made him both beloved and criticized in equal measure. But while cameras captured his public triumphs, they missed the private tragedy unfolding behind closed doors. The woman who stood beside him for over 30 years, Suzanne Hinn, carried secrets that would eventually shatter their marriage not once, but twice. And now, years after their final separation, Suzanne has made an announcement that changes everything we thought we knew about their divorce. What she revealed goes far beyond the tabloid headlines and the rumors that followed their very public split. It exposes a story of prescription medication dependency, misdiagnosis, cries for help that went unheard, and a marriage that survived against impossible odds only to collapse again years later. The question everyone wants answered is simple but haunting. What really destroyed the marriage between Benny and Suzanne Hinn? And what has she finally admitted that explains the shocking decision she made? The first cracks appeared in 1997, though most of the world would not learn about them for more than a decade. Suzanne Hinn was struggling. She felt overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted, and desperate for answers. Something was wrong, but she could not identify what. So she made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time. She left for a 3-week medical evaluation, hoping doctors could diagnose whatever was affecting her mental and physical health. But according to Suzanne herself, what happened during that evaluation set off a chain of events that would haunt her for 15 years. The doctors misdiagnosed her condition. They prescribed medications meant to stabilize her emotions and help her cope with daily life. Suzanne trusted them. She took the medications as directed. And slowly, without fully realizing what was happening, she became dependent on them. The substances that were supposed to heal her became the very things that controlled her. Over the years that followed, Suzanne's behavior changed in ways that alarmed those closest to her. She acted in ways that seemed completely out of character. Her emotions swung unpredictably. At times, she seemed like a different person entirely. And the worst part, the detail that makes this tragedy even more painful, is that Benny did not fully understand how much medication his wife was taking or how deeply those prescriptions had altered her mental state. He saw the changes. He knew something was wrong. But the true scope of her struggle remained hidden. Then came February 2010. Suzanne reached a breaking point. Overwhelmed, medicated, and emotionally shattered, she made a decision that would shock the Christian world. She filed for divorce. The divorce filing sent shockwaves through Christian media. Benny Hinn, the famous televangelist whose ministry had touched millions, was suddenly facing the collapse of his marriage. For someone whose entire public image revolved around faith, miracles, and God's power to transform lives, the personal failure felt devastating. News outlets picked up the story immediately. Speculation ran wild. And in the middle of all the public scrutiny, Suzanne was battling demons most people could not see. But what happened immediately after she signed those divorce papers reveals just how desperate her situation had become. Suzanne has said that after the papers were signed, she went directly to a friend's house seeking comfort and support. She walked through the door, hugged her friend, and then without warning, she collapsed. She fainted right there, her body finally surrendering to the emotional and physical exhaustion that had been building for years. Looking back now, Suzanne describes that moment and the entire divorce differently than most people assumed. She was not simply trying to end her marriage. In her own words, filing for divorce was a cry for attention. It was a desperate attempt to make Benny see how much pain she was in. It was her way of screaming for help when she felt like no one was listening. That admission changes everything. It means the divorce was not the result of irreconcilable differences or a desire to walk away. It was the act of a woman drowning, reaching for anything that might save her. And Benny, consumed by the demands of his ministry and unaware of the full extent of her medication dependency, did not see it coming. The separation that followed was agonizing for both of them. Benny would later describe those 2.5 years as some of the most painful of his entire life. He publicly admitted that the experience forced him to examine himself in ways he had avoided before. It made him realize how much he had neglected his family while building his ministry. He began to understand that success in the pulpit meant nothing if his home was falling apart.
During interviews and public statements, Benny asked his family for forgiveness.
He asked the body of Christ to forgive him. He acknowledged that he had failed as a husband, and he took responsibility for the breakdown. Meanwhile, Suzanne knew that reconciliation was impossible unless she addressed the real problem. Her dependency on prescription medications had to end. In early 2010, she made one of the hardest decisions of her life.
She checked herself into the Betty Ford Center, one of the most well-known rehabilitation facilities in the country. For 3.5 months, Suzanne underwent intensive treatment. The process was grueling.
It forced her to confront the years of pain, confusion, and loss that had accumulated while she was medicated. But it also gave her clarity. She began to understand what had happened to her during those 15 years. She learned to recognize the warning signs of emotional overwhelm and, more importantly, how to cope without relying on substances.
By the time she completed treatment, Suzanne could finally say something she had not been able to say in over a decade. She was free. Her healing marked a turning point.
The Hinn family, which had been praying fervently for restoration throughout the separation, began to see hope.
Suzanne was recovering. Benny was repentant.
And slowly, carefully, they began rebuilding what had been broken. Their reconciliation did not happen overnight, but by 2013, something remarkable occurred. Benny and Suzanne Hinn decided to get married again. The ceremony took place at the Holy Land Experience in Orlando, Florida, before a large audience of supporters, ministry partners, and curious onlookers. The late pastor Jack Hayford officiated, lending credibility and spiritual weight to the occasion. It was presented as a triumph of faith, a testament to God's power to restore even the most damaged relationships. Benny Hinn Ministries capitalized on the moment, selling DVDs of the remarriage ceremony for $25 each.
For many believers, the remarriage represented hope.
It proved that no marriage was beyond saving, that forgiveness was possible, and that love could survive even the darkest seasons. But what the cameras and the celebration did not show was the context surrounding their reunion. By the time Benny and Suzanne remarried in 2013, his ministry was already facing serious challenges.
The golden age of televangelism was fading, and Benny Hinn's empire was starting to crack.
In 2016, just 3 years after their remarriage, Trinity Broadcasting Network removed his television program from their lineup. The following year, Daystar Television Network did the same.
These were not minor setbacks. TBN and Daystar represented two of the largest Christian broadcasting platforms in the world.
Losing access to those audiences meant losing millions of viewers and, more critically, millions of dollars in donations.
Then there were the financial controversies that had plagued Benny's ministry for years.
In 2007, Senator Chuck Grassley launched a congressional inquiry into 6 prominent televangelists, including Benny Hinn. The investigation focused on their lavish lifestyles, private jets, luxury homes, and whether they were misusing tax-exempt donations. While the inquiry eventually closed without formal charges, it damaged Benny's reputation and raised questions that never fully went away. But perhaps the most painful controversy came shortly after Suzanne filed for divorce in 2010.
Photographs surfaced showing Benny Hinn holding hands with Paula White, another prominent televangelist, while walking through Rome, Italy.
The images became tabloid fodder and added fuel to the rumors already swirling around the divorce. Both Benny and Paula denied any romantic involvement, insisting they were simply ministry colleagues and friends. But the optics were damaging, and the timing could not have been worse. So when Benny and Suzanne reunited in 2013, they were not just rebuilding a marriage. They were attempting to salvage reputations, restore public trust, and prove that their faith was stronger than their failures. For a while, it seemed to be working. They appeared together at ministry events. They spoke about restoration and second chances. They presented themselves as living proof that God could mend what seemed irreparably broken. But beneath the surface, something was still wrong. The pressures that had contributed to their first divorce had not disappeared.
The financial stress on Benny's ministry continued mounting. The public scrutiny never truly faded.
And the emotional wounds from years of separation, medication dependency, and public humiliation ran deeper than either of them may have realized.
Then, in November 2025, the news broke.
Suzanne had filed for divorce again. For the second time, their marriage was ending. And this time, there would be no remarriage, no grand ceremony, and no DVD sales celebrating restoration. It was simply over.
The announcement left many people stunned and confused.
How could a couple who had already survived divorce, years of separation, addiction, public scandal, and financial turmoil fail again after reconciling? How could a marriage that had been publicly restored in front of thousands of witnesses collapse so completely just 12 years later? The answers to those questions remain complicated and, in many ways, private.
Neither Benny nor Suzanne has provided extensive public explanations for their second divorce.
But what Suzanne has revealed in recent months sheds new light on her journey and the struggles that defined her marriage.
She has spoken openly about the years she lost to prescription medication dependency.
She has described the emotional toll of living in the shadow of a world-famous ministry while battling private demons. And she has been remarkably candid about what the first divorce really meant. It was not an ending. It was a scream for help.
That revelation reframes everything.
It means the public narrative about their marriage, the story that painted Suzanne as the one who walked away, was incomplete. It means Benny's ministry success came at a cost his family paid behind closed doors. And it means the restoration everyone celebrated in 2013 may have been built on a foundation that was never fully repaired.
But Suzanne's story does not end with divorce.
In fact, the most surprising part of her journey is what she has done since the marriage ended.
Rather than retreating into privacy and silence, Suzanne has stepped more fully into ministry work of her own.
She has continued speaking, teaching, and leading prayer gatherings. And the focus of her message has remained consistent: intercession, emotional healing, spiritual freedom, and the importance of seeking God even when life feels impossibly broken. In January 2025, just months after her second divorce was finalized, Suzanne appeared in a ministry program focused on intercession and the healing of body and soul. She participated in interviews with Katie Souza, discussing the daily responsibilities of an intercessor and what it means to live a life committed to prayer. She described intercession not as an occasional spiritual practice, but as a continuous commitment that requires determination, compassion, and personal discipline. She also joined Souza for ministry events in California, continuing to build her own platform separate from the Benny Hinn legacy. What stands out about Suzanne's recent ministry work is how directly it connects to her personal story. She speaks about emotional healing because she has experienced profound emotional pain. She teaches about freedom from dependency because she fought that battle herself. And she emphasizes the importance of prayer because, in her darkest moments, prayer was the lifeline that kept her connected to hope.
But perhaps the most shocking part of Suzanne's announcement is not what she revealed about Benny.
It is what she revealed about herself. By admitting that her divorce was a cry for help rather than a desire to end her marriage, Suzanne challenged the narrative that had defined her for over a decade. She took responsibility for her actions while also exposing the invisible struggle that drove those actions. She showed that sometimes the most destructive decisions come from the deepest pain. And she proved that healing is possible even after years of suffering.
Today, Suzanne Hinn lives a quieter life than she did during her decades as a televangelist's wife. She has not shared extensive details about where she currently resides or what her daily life looks like outside of ministry.
But her public work continues. She still speaks. She still teaches. She still prays for others. And she still carries the story of a woman who survived what should have destroyed her. As for Benny Hinn, his ministry continues as well, though it operates on a smaller scale than it once did.
The massive crusades and global television reach have diminished, but he still preaches, still holds healing services, and still maintains a following of devoted supporters.
Their story, complicated and painful as it is, will not be forgotten. It serves as a reminder that even the most public figures face private battles. That fame and faith do not guarantee a perfect marriage. And that sometimes, the most shocking announcements are simply the truth we were too afraid to see.
What do you think about Suzanne's revelation? Do you believe their reconciliation was genuine, or was it doomed from the start? Let us know in the comments below.
And if this story moved you, like, subscribe, and join us as we continue uncovering the untold stories behind the world's most famous ministries.